First, China built cities. Then it built megacities. Now it's combining those megacities to build cluster cities. And not just one or two of them, but 20 cluster cities. If we zoom into the Pearl River Delta, and right here is where the Chinese government is working on the Greater Bay Area. A cluster city that has urbanized exponentially in the past 20 years. And it's all because China managed to connect the dots between opportunity, connectivity, and most importantly, between geography and its people. This landscape is at the forefront of prosperity, but also at the forefront of being affected by climate change. The world is closely observing the Greater Bay Area and wondering, can China pull it off? So you've heard of hamlets, villages, towns, and cities. Well, there is also megacities, ones with populations of over 10 million people. But there's also the phrase megalopolis, which is a cluster of cities, and there's many of those all over the world, especially in China. Now, there are different terms and definitions surrounding the urbanization phenomenon, but simply put, these cluster cities are mega regions. One of these mega regions is the Greater Bay Area, sitting right on the Pearl Delta River. And right here is where the Chinese government is working on adding 9 and 2. To the world, 9 plus 2 equals 11. But to China, it adds up to these 9 cities and 2 special administrative regions that make up the Greater Bay Area. With a population of over 85 million people, it is spread over 56,000 square kilometers, making this the world's largest and most populous urban area. I thought London had a lot of people. In 2022, it looks like this, but if I reverse the clock slowly, you can see how it began to develop rapidly in the past 2 decades. For us to understand this region's growth, we have to understand its soil and the delta itself. A delta is basically a landform that's created as rivers empty their waters and sediment into another body of water. This occurs whenever a river enters an ocean, an estuary, a lake, or any other type of water. Deltas aren't just landforms, they are landforms filled with potential, and we've taken advantage of them in the past. They've played a major role in human civilization by being important agricultural centers and historic sites of trade. The Pearl River Delta is no different. The development of the Pearl River Delta started as early as 1557 when Portugal acquired a permanent lease on Macau. Soon after the Opium War, Britain gained control over Hong Kong, and a few decades later signed a 99-year lease on it. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was established, and in less than 15 years' time, the then Premier Zhou Enlai called on the country's best scientists and engineers to develop China on all fronts. In 1980, Shenzhen was coined a special economic zone, hoping it would encourage foreign investment and rapid industrialization. One could argue even the Greater Bay Area is what it is today because of this decision. In the late 90s, Hong Kong and Macau were transferred to China under the status of special administrative regions. This means that although these cities belong to Chinese territory, they have separate governing systems and democracies independent of China. In July 2017, President Xi Jinping, the National Development and Reform Commissions, and the governments of Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau signed a framework agreement to develop the Greater Bay Area. It supports one of the most urbanized economies in the world, and it's all because these 2 former European colonies, Hong Kong and Macau, were welcoming business from the West and providing a way into the massive Chinese market. And today it's among the 4 largest bay areas in the world. In fact, as of 2020, the Greater Bay Area's GDP accounted for nearly 12% of China's GDP, at $1.7 trillion US, and it's steadily growing over 4% every year.
That is crazy. 1.7 trillion, 14 trillion.
It's a lot of money. Speaking of GDP, it's important to understand that like with any nation, particularly one that's as populous as China, the major goal is to make sure it's economically sound. China decided that one of the best ways to do this is through urbanization. It was one of the least urbanized countries in the later half of the 20th century. Barely 20% of Chinese citizens lived in urban areas, and many of today's cities were still small villages. Over the past 4 decades, it's opened up its economy, which has led to better economic development and living standards. Slowly but steadily, people flock towards cities. Not too long ago, China's urban population surpassed its rural population. Now, over 60% of the population live in urban areas. And a major contributor to all of this is the idea of cluster cities. Of course, it wasn't going to ignore its treasure trove, the Pearl River Delta. The Chinese government made strategic moves by assigning Xinjiang and Zhuhai as special economic zones in hoping that these locations could act as overflow for the businesses in Hong Kong. And it worked. Its impact on the Pearl River Delta was immediate. Despite being the youngest region to have formed in China, the Greater Bay Area is rich in capital and talent. A number of other factors, such as having a world-class seaport and cheap and abundant land, helped contribute to the rise of the region. It was done in a very methodical, top-down approach. They split the 11 areas into 4 core cities and 7 node cities. Hong Kong, the international financial center; Macau, the leisure and tourism center; Guangzhou, the province capital of Guangdong, is the gateway city and a trade and business center; and Shenzhen, the global innovation hub; and 7 other cities brimming with opportunities. Dongguan has grown triple-fold due to its manufacturing industry. To put that into perspective, over 70% of the world's computer motherboards, 75% of the world's toys, and 20% of the world's smartphones are made here. This is essentially the made in China phenomenon. This city has a geographical advantage as it benefits from a spillover from Shenzhen and Guangzhou. You see, the Greater Bay Area would mount to nothing without proper connectivity. Let me show you what I mean. Say I wanted to go from Hong Kong to Shenzhen. It used to take me 50 minutes until the Chinese government built the 26-kilometer-long high-speed rail network spanning from Hong Kong to Guangzhou. The 50-minute journey was cut down to just 14 minutes. Sounds amazing, right? Not really. I would need to go through a scrutinizing, annoying immigration or customs process. I even need to have a separate visa due to Hong Kong's departure process and mainland China's arrival clearance. According to the MTRC, departing passengers should arrive at the station around 45 minutes before the train leaves to allow time for immigration and custom clearance. I mean, that is close to 50 minutes, isn't it? To add to that, it often takes much longer to get to train stations within cities than to travel via train between cities. Another connection mode is the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. Calling it a bridge is an understatement. This is a 55-kilometer bridge tunnel system consisting of a series of 3 bridges, 4 artificial islands, and even an undersea tunnel. Construction took 8 years and cost nearly $19 billion US. It is the longest sea crossing in the entire world. This feat of engineering too comes with its disadvantages. Since Hong Kong, Macau, and Zhuhai each have different visa regulations, a driver must have 3 different types of visa and know both left-hand and right-hand traffic, as the bridge demands switching between the 2.
That is so annoying.
To keep traffic low, the government has made it compulsory for drivers to deal with high toll fees, various barriers due to immigration policies, and a licensing system that requires them to obtain special permits in advance to use the bridge. So you can't just go on this bridge on a road trip. No. You need to follow all the bureaucracy. There's more that connects this region. Ferries that connect the Greater Bay Area to islands in the Pearl Delta River, the Nasha Bridge between a district of Guangzhou and Dongguan. By the way, I'm sorry if I am butchering this Mandarin. Obviously, it's not my first language. Please do not roast me in the comments. A cluster city, especially a coastal one like the Greater Bay Area, can't function without proper connectivity. In fact, it wouldn't even qualify as a cluster city. These connection points play the same role that USB hubs do, to connect our MacBooks to our hard drives or other external devices. And similarly, cluster cities need proper connection. The better the connectivity, the better the government's ability to merge potential to opportunities for better efficiency and growth. But the entire Greater Bay Area, like the rest of China's cluster cities, is at risk. It's threatened by, you guessed it, climate change and environmental pollution. What else? I'm going to quote a study published in June of 2020 for you guys. It says, in general, the water environment pollution in the Pearl River Delta region is the most serious and the most concerning. The air pollution has the worst impact, resulting in extreme events such as smog and acid rain. And soil pollution needs more attention due to the lack of monitoring data. Now, this is serious, and the people of the region are able to witness this on a daily basis. Over the years, China has taken measures to improve environmental conditions in the Greater Bay Area, but it isn't enough. Air pollution, for instance, places a massive healthcare burden on its people, especially on the poorer individuals and communities. These sites also have a low level of resilience in terms of their preparedness to cope with climate-related disruption. One of the major contributions to this in the Pearl River Delta is the loss of mangroves. When it comes to water, Guangdong of the Greater Bay Area isn't necessarily water scarce, but the entire Pearl River Delta is highly stressed due to rapid urbanization. The area is at risk due to floods, seawater intrusion, and sea level rise, but changes are happening slowly. For instance, China is focusing on building 30 sponge cities that can alleviate urban flooding. And 2 of them are in Shenzhen and Zhuhai. The Greater Bay also has to deal with income inequality and currency issues as it ties together mainland China and Hong Kong due to the one country, two system principle. By 2047, this agreement comes to an end, and this is something that Hong Kong residents just don't want. Hong Kong's goal is to continue to be economically prosperous, but it would also like to continue to be politically autonomous. But that's where China believes in the spillover effect to ensure prosperity, not just in Hong Kong, but in the entire region. In fact, some of China's top-ranked universities are in the region, and more are said to pop up in the future, as this is now seen as the center for technology and business. The development of the Pearl River Delta from 1557 has been exponential. It still has to figure out a better connectivity for its people to keep up with the migrating population, a sustainable way of life, because at this rate, the Pearl River Delta is at risk. But in the end, despite all the hurdles, China's urbanization process will continue, with it reaching 70% by 2035.